If you scroll over, Andy, you'll see the others that are on.
Good evening, everyone. This is a special call council meeting, but we're going to start this one like we do all the rest. We start with a word of prayer and the Pledge of Allegiance. Miss Isby, could I bother you to word of prayer for us, please, ma'am?
Sure. If you'll bow with me, our gracious Father, we thank you for the abundant blessings that you've given us. We thank you, Lord, for this city that you have made us to be stewards of. We pray, Lord, that everything that we do will be pleasing in your sight, and that at the end that you will get the glory. And it's in your name that we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Thank you, Miss Isby. We'll now call this meeting to order. Mr. Garrett, would you call the roll?
Mr. Hawkins?
Here.
Mr. Grimes?
Here.
Mr. Pruitt?
Here.
Ms. Mel?
Here.
Ledbetter?
Here.
Ms. Smith?
Here.
Mr. Jones?
Here.
Ms. Isby?
Here.
And I'd like to recognize some folks we have here, a special guest tonight, and some also folks from the city who can answer questions. Neldia Dicus from the Arkansas Department of Health, Tim Bowman from Baptist Health, Erica Spear with Conway Regional, Ty Ledbetter with the Conway Fire Department, Jamie Gates with the Conway Chamber, AJ Gary with the Director of Arkansas Department of Emergency Management, Mike Winter, Conway Fire Department, and William Tapley with the Conway Police Department. I've asked you to, I've called for this special meeting tonight because, as you will, I'm sure you're all aware, that the governor allowed cities to adopt ordinances concerning the wearing of face masks. This pertains to businesses, and I thought we would ask some of our guests to speak if they want to, or counsel if you have some questions for them. I thought this would be the place to ask. I'm going to start off with Ty Ledbetter, who is the COVID czar for the city of Conway. And Ty, would you just give us a little breakdown on the numbers today for Conway?
Okay, can you see me there?
Yes.
All right. Today we had an increase of 19 new cases. Overall, yesterday, I don't have the current positivity rate for today. That should come out later on tonight. I believe we had 234 active cases overall this month. That's up from 6 at the first of the month. So we're really seeing a really large spike in Conway and in Faulkner County.
Okay. Thank you, Ty. Jamie, would you address the thoughts and the concerns from our businesses here in Conway?
Primarily, and most of the things we've heard have been focused around the hospitality. Most recently, we've heard from some restaurants looking for ways to maybe even pursue further inspection and to be designated as, exceeding kind of the minimum standards. We've tried to share what workplaces are doing around the country and some of the best practice, but we haven't had a lot of, we haven't heard a lot from people, and the issues kind of vary depending on your workplace setting. I mean, manufacturers are handling this very differently than places that have the freedom to work remotely. So it's really as different as every industry type.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Gates. Chief Tapley, should this be enacted toward our businesses, what would be the impact, do you think, to the Conway Police Department?
So the ordinance as it reads really doesn't change much for our department or for law enforcement. There's no enforcement action that goes along with this. We simply act in a support manner. If a business owner has an issue with a patron that doesn't want to wear a mask or something like that, we can come in and talk to them, but ultimately it's up to the business owner to decide what takes place. If they decide that the person is not welcome at the establishment, of course, we would help assist with that. But as far as an enforcement action, there is not one for us.
Okay. Council, do you have any questions for Ms. Dykus, Mr. Bowman, or Ms. Spear? Or AJ, it's hard for me not to call you Chief, or Director Gary?
I
Ms.
have
Dyke-
one question, Mayor.
Yes, ma'am.
So if this ordinance passes, it's my understanding that the Walmart of the world and the Kroger and Targets and all, or the ones here in Conway, would have to require masks in order to visit their establishments.
I'm gonna, if I speak out of turn, I'm gonna ask City Attorney Chuck Clausen to straighten me out. The way I understand it is that we'll say Kroger. We'll say that Kroger decides that they want to enforce this ordinance, then they will post a sign out front with our ordinance that says, in order to shop here, you have to wear a mask before you come in. However, if Walmart chooses not to follow this ordinance, then really all you have to do to go in Kroger is just maintain your 6 foot distance. You would not have to wear a mask. Is that correct, Mr. Clausen?
Partially.
Okay, good. That's why I ask you.
Yeah, and I think that maybe Ms. Dykus could kind of jump in here, but basically what we're doing is requiring the guidelines and directives that have been handed down from the Arkansas Department of Health. So all businesses located within the city limits of Conway would have to enforce these, and all patrons that came in. And it would basically provide, the city would then provide support in them enforcing those guidelines.
Okay, so every business would have to follow these guidelines?
Yeah, we're going to require them to follow these guidelines.
Okay.
That's correct.
Okay. But I guess, let me back off that, Ms. Smith. So what it pertains to in Conway would strictly be businesses. It doesn't, if you're walking down the sidewalks in Conway or down the streets in Conway or anywhere other than a business, as long as you can maintain your 6 foot of social distancing, then we're not requiring you to wear a mask. This would strictly be for our businesses.
Has the businesses been contacted about this meeting tonight, and they all are well aware of what is coming down if this ordinance passes?
I don't know that they've all been advised of it, but based on the number of phone calls that we have received in our office ever since the governor announced this, I would say that most of them are pretty well informed.
Okay, are we as a city or those businesses willing to pass out face masks to the majority that don't have them or can't afford to buy them?
That is something that we could take up right now. I guess I know that another city in Arkansas did that. They put some money into an emergency fund for the businesses where they purchase those. That would be a decision that this council would have to make. But we had not planned on discussing that. But we should discuss that tonight. Absolutely.
Because it's expensive. I mean, I purchased 25 at one of the stores for $18, which is not cheap for some people that can't hardly afford to buy groceries right now. So that's my big concern too, that, I know one of the other major cities in America, they said that that's what they did before they proposed a face mask on people to visit establishments, was they had to be proactive and hand out masks to whoever needed them, and that's something they had to do initially before they imposed the mask on people to wear those. So
Okay.
it's just
Bart.
something to think about.
Yes.
This is David. Hey, Chuck or anybody, again, correct me if I'm wrong here. This is all kind of new and evolving, but I think it's been stated that there is little or no enforcement mechanism in this, meaning that if someone chooses to try to enter a place without a mask, there'll be no ticket or fine or citation. Is that correct?
That is correct. There's no criminal penalty or criminal enforcement of this ordinance.
Is there, if a business, and this is something that just came up, Mary Ann thought about that, if there's a business that chooses not to do this, is there any kind of enforcement mechanism there? I'm assuming there's probably not.
Not from the city, no, sir. The Department of Health could step in It's my understanding just as recently as today, they shut down a business in Little Rock
Yeah.
for that very reason, not following the guidelines and directives, but the city would not be enforcing those. No, sir.
Yeah.
And-
And also, I guess, for point of clarification, this ordinance was pretty much take it or leave it. We didn't have any opportunity to change it or amend it to do anything. Is that correct?
That's pretty much correct. This was basically the sample ordinance that the governor's office in concert with the Arkansas Municipal League developed. It's looking to allow the cities to make a determination on what they would like to do. However, as you mentioned, it doesn't provide much in way of enforcement. It's more of a statement by the city, a recognition of the importance of the guidelines. And I believe, like Conway has said in multiple occasions and in multiple venues, that we support and encourage the use of masks when that 6 foot social distancing, safe distance cannot be maintained. And so this is more or less formalizing that and allowing the businesses something to point to when patrons try to enter their establishment and refuse to wear a mask.
Thank you.
Which
I have
brings
one more
which brings
question.
me back to what I misunderstood. Ms. Dacus, you can weigh in on this. I was under the impression that this was for businesses that chose to fall under this ordinance. Am I incorrect on that, Ms. Dacus? If this is adopted, it will be for all businesses, no matter if they want to enforce it or not.
Yes, it would be a citywide guidance. We do have regulations from our environmental health for restaurants and bars with the ABC, and they do come under other state regulations, and that's why they were able to close the facility for not following those guidelines. But these are guidelines that are, strictly, as you were saying earlier, to have a conformity opinion and desire for the community to be safe, to wear masks, have a proper distancing, social distancing, to protect themselves and others.
Thank you, Ms. Dacus. Ms. Smith, you have a
Mayor,
question?
I have one more question. It's the schools under the ordinance, does that count universities as well? Or is it strictly the public schools and private schools, or what is that?
Or does it include schools at all?
Yeah,
No.
it says schools in the ordinance.
I know it says that, but I've heard some conflicting messages whether that even applies to schools, even though it says it does.
And should we leave that up to the superintendents of those schools to make that determination, whether you want a kindergartner to wear a mask all day or whatever?
It is up
Is that
to-
something we need to be deciding on?
Right. It is up to the superintendents and the school boards of the schools in Conway, St. Joseph, and Conway Christian,
And UCA.
as well
Hendricks,
as
CBC.
UCA, Hendricks, and
Okay.
So this in fact does not apply to schools.
is that correct, Chuck?
Yeah, so you got to remember,
It
Mr. Conway,
does.
this is it's basically a formal recommendation and requirement of the guidelines. And if the guidelines in certain circumstances, as Ms. Dacus had pointed out, that it's not a requirement, but merely a strong suggestion to prevent and slow the spread of COVID-19. So as long as there's not other regulations that require these specific guidelines, then yes, it is up to certain organizations to make that determination.
Thank you.
I just want the people, I've heard from several people that work for the school district, and I just want them to be aware that that's up to their superintendent to decide that decision and not us. I mean, I think they think that we have that authority to impose that on the schools.
Anybody else?
So basically, it would just let us strongly recommend that the mask be worn. There's no penalty, other than, Mayor, what you have said in the past. You've been strongly recommending that, but other than just having that in writing, that's about the only difference.
Well, no, I probably brought a little confusion to us all. The ordinance is not an opt-in or opt-out for the businesses. If this ordinance is adopted tonight, it will pertain to all businesses in Conway. But to answer your question, Mr. Ledbetter, no, there's no penalty. From what I understand, and Mr. Clausen again, correct me, is if you go into a business and do not wear a mask, they can ask you to leave. And if you do not leave, then they can ask the police department to make you leave, but there is no fine. There's no citation, nothing like that.
And just some clarification on this, kind of let you know where we're at overall. That is a right that any business owner in Conway has currently, even without this ordinance. If they would like someone to leave their premises for whatever reason, they can call the authorities and the authorities can escort them from the premises. In this particular situation, it would require arrest. Actually, the education and encouragement is first from law enforcement. And then if they still refuse, then they can escort them. But again, there's no, unless something else occurs, there would be no arrest or citation.
And I think there's according to Felicia, there's a number of questions concerning this ordinance. And that's why I wanted to be sure and be clear that it does pertain to all businesses, but business, any other event or happening in Conway, or you out and about, it does not apply. You do not have to wear a mask if you want to walk down the sidewalks of Conway and there's not a big event going on where you can maintain 6 feet of social distancing, then no, you're not required to wear a mask. That is correct, Mr. Clausen. Yes. Erica, would you like to throw a little wisdom at us?
Sure. Can y'all hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
All right. So as far as masks go, the more we can encourage people to wear a mask, we know the science shows that it will slow the spread of COVID-19. And how that works is, if y'all don't know, the droplets that come out of people's mouths when they talk or cough or sneeze, they may not be showing signs of COVID-19. They may be pre-symptomatic or asymptomatic, and those are infectious droplets. So putting that mask on keeps your droplets from going that 6 to 12 feet that we know it can do. And it also gives you a little bit of security by just having a barrier over your nose and mouth. So if someone's droplets don't go directly into your nose or mouth, but it's mostly to keep your droplets with you when those 6 feet can't be kept, especially in stores and businesses where it's very hard to do when you're walking around up and down aisles.
Thank you. Tim Bowman, Baptist, would you like to address us?
Hey, yes, sir. Thank you. Well, I completely agree with Erica. I think it was very well stated. So we're very much in line with what she stated. Just to add on to what Ty reported on the numbers, we are seeing an uptick in cases positively in the area, and ones that are coming to the hospital requiring hospitalization. So we're, well staffed, got a good number of beds and ventilators, so we're not in any risk of that. We're well prepared with PPE. So we're in good standings with all of that, but we are seeing the upward trend that Ty indicated.
Thank you, Tim. Director Gary, do you have any words of wisdom for us?
Hey, good afternoon, or good evening, I should say. Nothing really to add, Mayor. I think y'all have pretty much covered everything. As far as, a PPE for the hospitals and our medical facilities and medical personnel, the state has worked hard over the last few months to acquire it, even when the supply chain was not very good, and we were able to source some and bring it into the state. But that supply chain is now opening up a little bit, so that has been very helpful. But we still do have some coming in, and we are distributing that out to our health providers as they need it.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Dacus, anything you'd like to add, ma'am?
Yes, no, thank you for inviting me and to answer any questions you may have.
Okay. Council, I guess that wraps it up on our end. We had asked if anyone had any questions, if they would send those in. Aaron, at this time, do we have any? Okay. So I guess we have two things we need to talk about. One is Ms. Smith's concern about our businesses and do we need to provide masks? And the second one was it's up to this council if you do or do not want to adopt this ordinance. So,
can I ask a quick question, Mayor?
Yes.
To Ms. Spears' point, talking about how the masks protect you. I've had people reach out to me and say, if I don't want to wear a mask, that's on me. With what you're saying, if you have the mask on, you're more protected. Spewing out anything out of your mouth if you're asymptomatic or whatever. So if someone doesn't have a mask on and you've got a mask on, does that affect you still?
So the mask mostly helps other people around you, because if I'm infectious and I have a mask on and the droplets can't go out to others, it gives me as a wearer some protection, but it's mostly protecting those that are around me.
Yeah, that's what I guess the point being made, that they feel like if they don't want to wear a mask and they get sick, that's on them. But do you see what I'm saying? And that's kind of what I've heard from some people through email and also text and phone calls. So it's just kind of one of those things that I wished everybody would be responsible people, but they're not going to be, wear their mask wherever they're out in public. But that's just kind of what I was hearing from some people. I don't know if anybody else has, but I know I have.
I think what Ms. Spear is saying is that you may not know you're infected and you're infecting other
Correct.
people.
Yeah.
And I think that's
totally
the bigger, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, most of the exposures that we get called into, a lot of them were, I'm around so-and-so, they assured me they were not sick, they didn't know, but then the day after they developed symptoms and now I've had exposure.
Mm-hmm.
To me, I think the people are not aware or don't want to be aware of the fact is it's not just to protect you, it's to protect other people. Mm-hmm. It's a selfless act to keep other people from being infected, not just you. That's what the mask is for, to protect other people. For once in your life, start thinking about other people other than yourself. That's what the mask is about.
We all know that, Theo, but other people don't want to be told what to do,
That's why I said that, because some people have got the wrong idea about the mask. It's to protect other people, not just yourself, and quit being selfish.
I agree.
Mr. Jones,
Yes,
Jones, you and I both know that there are going to be people that will wear masks and will wear them correctly. And I am in that group. Let me say that right now. I am in that group. There are going to be other people. This is a conspiracy and this is something's going on, and I'm not putting a mask on for anybody. And until it hits somebody in their family, when it's going to hit home with that person who won't wear the mask today, but in 2 weeks might wear the mask.
Well, see, I said I wasn't going to talk, but let me say this.
Yes, you are.
You know what I just retired from, and you know how people feel about the law. People break the law, and it's consequences behind that. And so trying to ask people to do something there's no consequence behind, and they already got in their mind not going to do it, all we can do is put it out there and hope that they do it. That's all we can do.
Yeah, that's fair. We do have two questions that we can address. One of them is, does this apply for churches? And Ms. Dacus, you can weigh in. From what I understand, and Ms. Dacus, please correct me if I'm wrong, as long as churches, places of worship maintain the 6 foot distance, they are not required as long as they have everyone spaced out correctly. Is that right?
That is correct. There are church guidelines as well. And I know Dr. Nate Smith has met with many of the church leaders to talk about the safety of the parishioners. So they do follow the guidelines also.
Okay. And another question that's been brought up is our baseball and softball tournaments that we're having around the state, but specifically in Conway. The people who put on our tournaments are required to turn in a plan to the Arkansas Department of Health, which is approved by the Arkansas Department of Health. And once they get that approval as to the guidelines that they are having to follow, then we allow them to play ball. Any other questions, comments?
I don't have a question, but I do have a comment. Where I work is basically an essential function area. And I think what this ordinance will do is for those businesses who are operating and trying to take care of their employees, this will at least give them some protection with people being able to come in with masks, or if they don't come in with masks, then they can say, you know, this is an ordinance. So if you don't have a mask on, we have the right to refuse you service.
Yes, that's correct. I'm going to ask City Attorney, future Judge Clausen, to read the ordinance for us.
Bear with me here. An ordinance by the City of Conway regarding the use of masks in relation to the COVID-19 pandemic. Whereas an outbreak of COVID-19, the coronavirus, has resulted in an ongoing global pandemic, and whereas on June 18, 2020, Executive Order 20-37 declared that the emergency declared pursuant to Executive Order 20-03 and its amendments was terminated, and that the public health and disaster emergency and declaration of the state of Arkansas as a disaster area resulting from the statewide impact of COVID-19 was declared anew and would be effective for 60 days unless renewed. And whereas on June 19th, 2020, the Arkansas Department of Health released guidance regarding the use of face masks and coverings by the general public, which asserts that ample evidence exists to support the efficacy of wearing face masks to prevent the transmission of COVID-19, including a World Health Organization, WHO, funded study. And whereas the aforementioned Arkansas Department of Health guidance on masks recommends that the general public should wear face coverings in all indoor environments where they are exposed to non-household members and distancing of 6 feet or more cannot be assured. This includes, but is not limited to, workplaces, retail stores, businesses, places of worship, courtrooms, jails, prisons, schools, healthcare facilities, and other people's homes. And whereas the aforementioned ADH guidance recommends that the general public should also wear face coverings in all outdoor settings where there is exposure to non-household members, unless there exists ample space of 6 feet or more to practice physical distancing. Whereas Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson supports and encourages the use of facial coverings in an effort to curb the spread of COVID-19, and whereas the United States Supreme Court has long recognized the state and local control over the spread of infectious diseases and gave broad leeway in responding to these threats in Jacobson v. Massachusetts, 197 U.S. 11, 1905. And whereas the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, encourages the use of cloth face coverings to curb the spread of COVID-19, and whereas individuals infected with COVID-19 are often asymptomatic and may transmit the virus, and whereas the health of employees and patrons of reopened businesses is directly threatened by individuals who enter such establishments without facial coverings. Now, therefore, be it ordained by the City of Conway, Arkansas, Section 1, upon consultation with the Arkansas Department of Health and the Governor's Office, the City of Conway requires the usage of facial coverings according to the ADH guidelines and directives available at www.healthy.arkansas.gov and as may be amended in an effort to help curb the spread of COVID-19, in particular to protect those most vulnerable to members of our community, as well as to ensure the hard-won progress made by citizens of Arkansas in reopening our shared economy is preserved. Section 2. The City of Conway has hereby determined that local law enforcement and the other city officials will act in a support capacity to local businesses that wish to enforce the use of masks upon their premises. Law enforcement acting in a support capacity shall educate and encourage members of the public who decline to wear facial coverings regarding the efficacy of wearing such coverings according to the ADH guidance on facial coverings released on June 19, 2020. Law enforcement may additionally act in a support capacity to local businesses by educating individuals who decline to comply with facial coverings required of any local business that the individual must abide by the requirement or leave the premises. Section 3, an electronic version of this ordinance will be made available on the city's website, www.conwayarkansas.gov, that all businesses will be required to print and display in a prominent area of the business or on the primary entranceway. Posting shall be as soon as practical, but not more than 14 days from the date of passage. Section 4. An emergency is declared to exist, and because of the need for an immediate response to the COVID-19 pandemic, this ordinance shall go into effect immediately upon passage. The emergency factors considered in declaring an emergency is the infectious rate of COVID-19, the rapid use of protective equipment across all sectors, the fatality rate, and the fatality rate if the virus is left unchecked. Therefore, an emergency is declared.
Thank you, Mr. Clausen. Council, do you have any other questions, comments? We've had one reading. I would take a motion to waive the other two.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to waive the other two readings. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Passes 8-0. I would like to finish up with a comment. We've received over 200 comments through emails and over 50 calls, and we have kept up with all the comments on Facebook that were either for or against, and we appreciate everyone's input. We really do. Some of the personal ones I got, I thought, I've never been called that before, but that's okay. That being said, I want everyone to know that we brought in Ms. Dykes, Mr. Bowman, Mr. Ledbetter, Ms. Spear, and Director Gary for a specific reason. There's a lot of rumor out there. There's a lot of innuendo. There's a lot of unknown. This is new to all of us, but these people live and work in Arkansas, and the majority of them live and work in Conway, Arkansas. That tells me that I trust them, and I hope you can trust them as well. This is what they think is in the best interest of the state, and that's what they say is in the best interest of this city. And so AJ and Ms. Dykes and Ms. Spear and Tim, thank you for stepping out there with us. Any other comments or questions? Ms. Dykes, there is one question for you. Does this apply to all age groups?
Yes.
Yes, it applies to all age groups, but as was mentioned earlier, the determination of whether or not to put a mask on a child under the age of 8 would be if they could wear it or would wear it.
Okay, thank you.
Does that need to be in the ordinance, Mayor?
It's in the Arkansas Department of Health regulations.
The guidelines, okay.
Yeah.
And what about my concern about the face mask? Are we going to figure something out on it beforehand or afterwards or what?
You can make a motion to that. Is that what we need to do, Mr. Clausen? How about Mary, since we are under spending freeze, can you give me a little bit of time to research that and let's get an idea on some numbers?
Sure.
And I will bring that to the council a week from tomorrow. Will that be okay?
Sure.
All right. Thank you. All right, council, it's in your court as to what you want to do.
Mr.
I'll
Mayor,
make a
one quick,
motion.
go ahead, Mary.
No, you go on, Andy.
I was just going to ask Ms. Spear or Ms. Dykes or Mr. Bowen, in our next to last whereas, it says individuals infected with COVID-19 are often asymptomatic. Is that a true statement, or is that a scattered bunch that are asymptomatic?
I'm an RN too. That is a true statement. It's not all people have the same immune system. So depending upon how the virus affects that person's body, as well as it is a silent, you can't hear it, see it, taste it, feel it. It is sneaky and it passes very easily. So having said that, then you may not know that you have it. It may pass through your system. They don't know how long it's in your system. Again, that depends on your individual body. So you could carry and shed that virus for a long time. So that's for the science to tell us, and they're doing the research. But yes, it's a very sneaky virus.
Thank you, Ms. Dykes. Ms. Spear?
Yes, I would agree with everything she said. And a lot of people that think they're asymptomatic just haven't developed symptoms yet. So they may be pre-symptomatic. But between those two groups, it is a large majority of people that at the time they are tested, they do not have symptoms and may develop symptoms later and may never develop symptoms, that they are still contagious.
Thank you very much. Mr. Bowen, would you like to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I just agree with them. I mean, I don't have the breakdown of the percentages of positives that we've had, which ones were asymptomatic or had symptoms. But it is, comes in all forms. So we are seeing some that do not have any symptoms that are testing positive.
Very good. Thank you. I think that's one of the most important things we can take away from this meeting tonight. You or I or anybody else might be carrying this and just not know it. And so that's the reason for putting the mask in place.
Thank you.
I make a motion for adoption of the ordinance and the emergency clause.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance with emergency clause. Mr. Garrett, would you call roll, please?
Ms. Mel,
Aye.
Mr. Jones,
Yes.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Grimes,
Aye.
Mr. Ledbetter,
Yes.
Mr. Pruitt,
Aye.
Mr. Hawkins,
Yes.
Ms. Isby.
Yes.
And the emergency clause, Ms. Mel,
Aye.
Mr. Jones,
Yes.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Grimes,
Aye.
Mr. Ledbetter,
Yes.
Mr. Pruitt,
Aye.
Mr. Hawkins,
Yes.
Ms. Isby.
Yes.
Those both pass 8-0. Again, Mr. Bowman, Ms. Dykus, Director Gary, and Ms. Spear, thank you for your time here. Again, this is if you're going in to shop in a business in Conway. That's something that each individual gets to determine if they want to go in there or not. If you're just out and about in Conway, as long as you're maintaining your social distance, there's nothing in this ordinance that makes people wear a mask. That is correct, Mr. Clausen. Okay. Thank you for everyone's time tonight. And
Mayor,
yes, ma'am.
one more
Yes, ma'am.
thing. Could you give that website again where people can find this? Because I'm sure there may be some businesses that will want to post it.
I'm sorry, I'm reading something. I'm sorry, Miss Isby. Run it by me again.
Can you give the website again for the people that are listening that might be interested in having this posted in their businesses?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, and we'll post this link as well, but it's the city's webpage. It's conwayarkansas.gov. But also the guidelines and directives can be found at healthy.arkansas.gov.
Thank you.
All right. Ms. Dykus, are you still on here?
She's gone.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Y'all be safe.